Hey, Cristiano. Okay, so for brevity's sake, we'll talk about the turbo as it pertains to road cars and not racing cars, because that's a different kettle of fish. As you said, it's a moot point. It's not really worth discussing whether or not they're valuable because they're here to stay. As far as I'm concerned, I have mixed feelings about turbos and road cars. Obviously, they make good torque, so for heavier vehicles, it's the way to go. For sports cars, yeah, you've got turbo lag. The sound is typically not as interesting, though it can be made to be fascinating. See the Pagani Zonda, or excuse me, the Huayra, which, in inheriting a turbocharged engine, developed the turbo noise specifically just so it was a little more enticing, a little more visceral, and I think that's one route to take. The whooshing and the popping can be pretty exciting if it's done right. Will it compare to the wail of a normally aspirated 10-cylinder or whatever? No, not really, but some give and take. There is another criticism I have of turbocharged engines, which are they tend to have sort of spiky power deliveries. And I know a lot of modern cars have smoothened out that surge of torque you tend to get in the mid-range with turbo cars, but for me that's not as interesting as something that revs out and produces a lot of power at the top end, or rather has a very linear power delivery. For me, that's the most one of the more important or impressive parts about an engine is how well and how smoothly you can put that power down, because when you're cornering, if you have a big surge of torque with a bunch of steering lock on, it makes it harder to put that power down, which might be exciting in some regards, but it's slower, and it touches also on the idea of lag. Lag can be useful. As you mentioned earlier, having a turbocharged engine is a bit like having a variable displacement engine, and by that I mean once you run the car out of boost, you have more fuel gains, but then you step it up a few thousand RPM and you have, in effect, a much larger engine. That's great and all, but I do find that a bit of lag, it can be taken two ways. You can either have the car which has eons of lag and you wait and wait and wait, and all of a sudden this tension builds and then the power is delivered. I mean, I remember driving an old Porsche 930 Turbo which had been modified, and you had to wait for 2 or 3 seconds after putting your foot down, and then you hear this big whistling sound, and all of a sudden you take off down the street like a rocket. That was pretty fun. It was almost a party trick in a way, because you knew it wasn't really that effective unless you really knew how to harness that boost. But on the other hand, you have a lot of newfound ways of reducing turbo lag, the simplest of which being just shorter runner lengths and smaller turbos, and which Porsche seems to be doing really well. I remember driving a newish 997 Turbo S with about, I think it was a 3.8 liter, but they had the variable vane turbos and increased compression, lower boost, and I remember it just pulling like a V8. It didn't really have any lag, and it was really enjoyable to drive and smooth. So that's one wave. That's probably the more conventional route one can take for resolving turbo lag. Another might be the Formula One inspired electric spooler, or whatever it's called. Either's good. I think that we'll probably see more of the types of powertrains you were advocating with the onset of these hybrid supercars like the P1 and the LaFerrari and so on, and the ability to do what they call torque fill, and by doing that they fill in sort of the gaps in the power band and give you this almost electric response with the zing and top end of a high revving combustion engine. That's probably what's going to happen instead of delving too much further into turbo technology, but who knows. So ultimately I'm mixed. To be honest, I like normally aspirated engines, but as you said, turbos are here to stay. hopefully we can still have some interesting sports cars. Now, you and I just recently had quite an interesting race, during which we had to endure a bit of rain and grease on slick tires, in a go-kart, by the way. So I was curious, seeing as this is one of the first times you and I have raced alongside one another in the rain, what you felt about it, and what you think the skills are that stand out most among great racing drivers who have that extra edge in the rain. Is it that they're great improvisers, or they're exceptionally daring, or is it because they have some sort of inherent skill from driving on snowy Nordic back roads? I don't know. You tell me. But I look forward to hearing from your response, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good one.